Anyone who's ever participated in a voter registration drive can tell you it's a huge hassle. The local boards who interact with volunteer voter registration campaigns create all sorts of barriers and restrictions that make it harder to bring new voters into the system. They say it's their job to maintain the quality of the electorate and embrace the tired canard about battling voter fraud. But it's clear that undertaking the noble effort to register voters is somehow a threat. The truth is that the local officials who are responsible for registering voters are connected to local politicians. Their jobs depend on local politicians staying in power, so they have a stake in maintaining a stable and predictable electorate. Some voters are welcome, others are not. So why hasn't anyone tried to rectify the nation's broken registration system? Some already have. Progress is being made in Oregon, the first state to pass an automatic voter registration law. Signed in 2015, the law automatically registered all eligible voters in the state's Department of Motor Vehicles database. Close to 300,000 new voters were added to the rolls in 2016. Included in Oregon's AVR law, there was a 21-day opt-out window for anyone who didn't want to be registered. This is an important detail because there are some people who intentionally refuse to register. Some consider it their First Amendment right not to register. I don't agree with that, but I respect the principle. This is the difference between an opt-in system and an opt-out system. Those who intentionally avoid the voter rolls are a very small minority. Right now, they don't have to do anything if they don't want to be registered. But there are plenty of other people who probably would vote if registration weren't intentionally harder than it has to be. If we flip the current system from one where it's the voter's responsibility to opt in to one where it's the voter's responsibility to opt out, we could radically change the shape of the American electorate. To her credit, in 2016, Hillary Clinton actually proposed ending felon disenfranchisement and enacting automatic voter registration as a part of her presidential platform. This was an important step in the right direction, though it does not appear that the Democratic Party shares her vision on this subject, so the proposal effectively died when she lost in 2016. However, even if she had won, there's little reason to think that her proposal would have been any more successful than Jimmy Carter's in 1976. Worried that American voter participation ranked 21st among the world's democracies, it's lower now. President Carter proposed a battery of electoral reforms, including universal election day registration, public campaign funding, and a constitutional amendment to end the Electoral College. This plan was met with broad public approval and support from both major parties. 2 Republican senators and 2 Republican representatives co-sponsored the registration legislation, adding provisions for making Election Day a national holiday and keeping polls open 24 hours. Minority Leader and Goldwater conservative John Rhodes foresaw the bill passing swiftly in substantially the same form with a lot of Republican support, including my own. Movement conservatives did not take such a charitable view. Ronald Reagan warned that Carter's proposals would invite wholesale election fraud, restrict effective challenges to incumbents, and render the Republican Party as dead as the dodo bird. A banner headline in Human Events called the reform package euthanasia for the GOP, and the Heritage Foundation predicted 8 million illegal aliens in the U.S. would somehow gain the vote. Millions of illegal immigrants voting? Where have I heard that before? Oh, that's right. That's how Hillary Clinton won her popular vote total, according to sore winner Donald Trump. Of course, dark allegations of undocumented immigrant voting were hogwash in the 1970s, just as they are today. As you've probably surmised, Jimmy Carter's electoral reforms went down in flames. Looking back on his failed proposal, Carter didn't just blame Republicans, saying, "Incumbent members of the Congress don't want to see additional unpredictable voters registered. To have a 25 or 30% increase of unpredictable new voters is something they don't relish. I would suggest to you that this is the single most important obstacle to increasing participation on Election Day." Nothing has changed since 1976. If anything, the Democratic Party is likely to be even more resistant to change now. As before, we can expect that any perceived benefit for the Democratic Party would create resistance among the Republicans and their supporters in the business community. No good can come for them if large swaths of mostly lower-income non-voters are suddenly enfranchised. But, as Piven and Cloward point out, Democrats have another reason to be gun-shy, saying, In order to implement a conservative economic program, the business community has shifted its contributions away from the Democratic Party, which is still tied to labor and lower income constituencies, and toward the Republican Party. That has had the ironic effect of making the National Democratic Party particularly sensitive to business concerns. To recap, there's no reason to think that either major political party would support efforts that ensure that every eligible American is registered to vote. There are people in this country who view the Democrats as the good guys, willing to face down the business class and take a stand on important issues. But it would seem that on this issue, the most basic and fundamental democratic rights of every American are less important than maintaining the status quo. Neither party is going to step up unless they are forced to. Therefore, an important lever for addressing economic and political inequality in this country will go untouched unless we do something about it. Every citizen should be able to vote on Election Day if they want. There is no good reason to make this harder than it has to be. Every eligible voter deserves a chance to vote. Since registration is used as a tool to prevent citizens from exercising their rights, registration barriers must be eliminated. Taking away a citizen's right to vote, stealing that most fundamental democratic right for partisan advantage, should be viewed as both morally repugnant and unpatriotic. No one, least of all the representatives who pledge to protect the common good, should be allowed to play games with our democratic process. It cannot be tolerated. If we want to call ourselves a democracy, we must strive to make it as democratic as possible. Let's make them pay.